Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. It's been a little while since we've seen you guys, so we got a lot of stories. But before we get into them, we're going to do 15 minutes in Spanish for our Spanish audience.
Sí, entonces los primeros 15 minutos son en español porque pues este canal es mayoritariamente en español ahora, aunque empezó en inglés. Pero gracias a todos los que se quedan a ver todo el live y luego si no hablas inglés o si pues, no te interesa verlo hasta el final, gracias por quedarte estos primeros 15 minutos. Como digo bastante, para los en vivos no siempre estoy súper preparada, porque normalmente yo edito los videos y ahorita estoy tratando de sacar el video sobre Latinx o Latinx o como le quieran decir para más tarde hoy. O sea, se suponía que ya tenía que haber salido, pero mi vida funciona en lentitud. Entonces, gracias por su paciencia. Y por hoy, pues no tengo mucho de qué hablar, justamente porque no he estado pues súper enterada de las noticias de hoy. Pero sí no vi el Super Bowl porque pues no lo entiendo y dura mucho tiempo y no me interesa mucho, pero me interesa todo lo que pasa en términos de la batalla cultural y lo que pasa con la gente y cómo van cambiando las opiniones. Y hice un video ahora hace como varias semanas sobre cómo el wokeismo pues infectó a los deportes. Y ahorita en el Super Bowl y hablé también de la NFL y cómo fue de los primeros puntos donde empezó todo esto del wokeismo con Colin Kaepernick, etc. Entonces me interesaba ver qué pasaba en el Super Bowl, pero ahorita ya que se acabó. Sí parece que cantaron el himno nacional para personas de color, no sé cómo lo puedo decir en español en YouTube, y ese fue como un punto de como wokeismo contra el cual varias personas estaban en contra porque dicen que pues si todos vamos a tratar de ser americanos y si todos estamos bajo una bandera y no queremos divisiones, ¿por qué estamos creándolas nosotros mismos? O bueno, un sector de la sociedad, ¿por qué está creando esas divisiones? Y también interesantemente en el Super Bowl, pues vemos que, ¿dónde está mi pantalla aquí? Vemos que abucharon a la Taylor, está perdiendo su estrellita, va terminando, bueno, ya terminó hace unos meses su mega tour y todo, era querida y amada por todo el mundo. Pero ahora parece que la estrellita le está dejando de brillar, en especial porque durante la campaña electoral que acabamos de ver en Estados Unidos se fue bastante en contra de Donald Trump y todo el mundo pensaba en sus círculos y en esas esferas que iba a ganar Kamala Harris, entonces se fue de boca por Kamala Harris, puso un post en Instagram, estaba muy a favor de la candidata y cuando el ahora vicepresidente J.D. Vance hizo el comentario sobre que todos los que apoyaban a Kamala eran mujeres sin vida y nada más con gatos. Y creo que también dijo gordas. Dijo, bueno, pues yo soy una de esas y puso una foto con sus gatos. Y pensó que eso le iba a gustar a todo su público, que nadie iba a apoyar a Trump, porque viven todos en una burbuja de la cual pues no tienen opiniones diferentes, diversas. Y ahora que vemos que ganó pues Donald Trump y J.D. Vance, ganaron ambos, y vimos que también ganaron el voto popular, pues quiere decir que están aún más desconectadas todas estas celebridades de lo que realmente quiere y necesita no solo su público, pero la gente en general, y como que no entienden por qué hay tanto rechazo ahora en contra de ellos, ahora que nos estamos dando cuenta de cómo funcionan sus alianzas, cuánto dinero pagó Kamala Harris durante su campaña para tener a todas estas celebridades dándole el visto bueno y diciendo que voten por ella. Entonces lo que pasó en el Super Bowl fue que la abuchearon, mostró la cámara a Taylor Swift y básicamente todo el estadio fue como, no, Taylor Swift, no. Y al principio también está como, no ha sido un buen mes para esta señora, un mes y medio, porque también salió hay todo y no hemos hablado de esto porque normalmente me interesa bastante como lo que pasa en los juicios, por ejemplo en el de Amber Heard y Johnny Depp estuve bastante al tanto, pero en como que me da flojera y es el juicio entre Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds y por alguna razón pues metieron a esta mujer también ahí porque se tiene que andar metiendo en todo, o bueno, esta vez la metieron sin que ella quisiera. lo que está pasando con todas las demandas por la película This Ends With Us, o esto termina con, no sé cómo la pusieron en español, pero esta película que ha sido muy controvertida porque se están peleando de que quién hizo qué y que la Blake Lively está mintiendo, y luego que el Justin Baldoni, feminista, también, que tampoco entiendo muy bien porque todo el mundo lo está apoyando, pero pues parece que el señor Ryan Reynolds y la señora Blake Lively no han sido como tan buenas personas como la gran mayoría piensa. Entonces se metió esta mujer también en eso, y al principio cuando vi que la abucharon dije, bueno, pues chance también es por eso, porque pues sus fans han de estar enojados de que ella acabó en que normalmente tiene una imagen bastante limpia. Ahora que Taylor Swift tiene una imagen bastante limpia, pues ahora parece que se está juntando con gente que le están manchando todo, y dije, bueno, le están abuchando porque se metió en todo este rollo y están enojados con ella. Pero no, bueno, o sea, en parte sí, pero también, pues sí tiene que ver con Donald Trump. Y aquí vemos, es un artículo de Glamour, fue el de los pocos que encontré en español, pero dice Taylor Swift abuchada en el Super Bowl, la razón política que lo causó. Y lo que me dio mucha risa sobre este artículo es cómo lo están, o sea, la forma en la que están poniendo el incidente como todo es culpa de Trump y ya ahora todo el mundo va a ser como pensábamos bajo Trump, y la misoginia y las pobres mujeres y pobre Taylor Swift que fue abuchada. Al principio como que ni ella entendía, no voy a poner videos porque ahorita el audio creo que no va a funcionar, pero no, como que ella no entendía, volteó a ver a Ice Spice, que es otra mujer que estaríamos todos mejor si le bajara la celebridad un poco, pero que también se voltearon a ver las dos, así como, ¿por qué nos están abuchando? Y aquí dice, quizá el momento hubiera resultado menos visceral si no fuera porque menos de una hora antes la multitud había estallado, esta vez en aplausos por ver a Donald Trump en la misma pantalla, porque cuando estaban cantando el himno nacional, pues obviamente está el presidente ahí, pues van a ponerlo en cámara. Y decía, para mí, y esta es una persona, creo que gringa, que lo escribió en inglés y luego lo tradujeron en español, pero dice, para mí las reacciones parecían tener un claro mensaje. El Super Bowl, uno de los mayores acontecimientos culturales del país, ha sido reclamado por Trump y el tipo de masculinidad tóxica de la que parece ser el faro. Y pues no, o sea, como explico en mi video de los deportes, fue al revés. O sea, de los pocos espacios que todavía tenían como los hombres y el mérito y tratar de ganar nada más por ganar, también entraron a decir que era tóxico y que ya no se puede y que el mérito no quiere decir nada. Entonces, más bien, se está regresando básicamente a su estado natural. Y está bien que hayan espacios así para pues, quien los quiera y los necesita, para los hombres, para los güeyes, para todo el mundo. Y para los que no le importa la masculinidad tóxica. Dice él y sus seguidores parecen estar viviendo para ello. Nada más hay que ver la respuesta del presidente poco después de abandonar el partido. No solo resaltó que Taylor Swift fue abuchada por el público, sino que se alegró de ello. Pues sí, todo el mundo le dio risa. Como ha hecho muchas veces anteriores, incluso diciendo que odiaba a Taylor Swift después de lo de Kamala Harris, dijo Donald Trump, la única que tuvo una noche más dura que los Kansas City Chiefs fue Taylor Swift. Y dice aquí, al insultarle al presidente de Estados Unidos, quiso seguir el ya habitual manual de misoginia en Internet. No le bastaba con burlarse públicamente de Swift, ahora tenía que trolearla por ello, intentando humillarla aún más. Y pues no, más bien todo el mundo ya se hartó de todas estas celebridades desconectadas del mundo y que ahora además traen aún más rollos, y que ellos mismos, bueno, ella misma decidió meterse en la política, y también lo hemos visto con George Clooney, lo hemos visto con... What's the name of that girl?
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. I was just thinking Mona Lisa Smile. Nada más estaba pensando en Mona Lisa Smile, no me acordaba el nombre. Entonces lo hemos visto con muchas celebridades que decidieron decir como, voy a usar mi plataforma para bien, y luego se están dando cuenta de que el bien que según ellos es bien, pues o no le interesa o le molesta o va en contra de, pues ya sea los valores o el clima cultural que hay en el público en general, con el cual están súper desconectados. Pero, por ejemplo, Taylor Swift siempre ha dicho que súper conectada con su público, no sé qué. Entonces, bueno, ese fue el drama con Taylor Swift, y es importante ver el cambio, yo no creo que es un cambio, es más bien una realización de que ya por fin se puede hablar un poco más abiertamente sobre lo que la gente realmente piensa, porque muchos de estos hombres, hasta los hombres que dicen que decían que eran feministas, pues más bien estaban diciéndolo nada más como por llevar la corriente y ahora como que ya se les dio, que ya puedes volver a hablar normal y pues todo el mundo lo está haciendo porque llevan como 8 años sin poder decir la verdad. Y pasando a la verdad y lo que ha pasado porque he estado siguiendo esta historia bastante también. Carla Sofía Gascón. Ahora sí ya se terminó de hundir. Yo empecé a hablar sobre Emilia Pérez desde que me enteré sobre este adefesio fílmico y así le voy a seguir diciendo. Y pues salió, si no te sabes toda la historia, todo México se enojó con la película por los estereotipos y por el director, que también ahora empezó a salir a decir Jacques Audiard, pues sí, odia a todo el mundo también este hombre, que no hizo investigación y ahora salió a decir que el lenguaje español es para pobres y para inmigrantes y que a él no le interesaba, pero pues que por eso hizo la película en español. Y luego salió esta mujer trans, que iba a ser la primera, aquí voy a usar pronombres normales porque si no nos cortan el stream, pero iba a ser la primera actriz trans en ganarse un Oscar y que la película más nominada, 13 nominaciones a Oscars que no se merece, y pues dio unos comentarios primero sobre una actriz que también fue nominada, una actriz brasileña, diciendo que su gente había empezado a hablar en contra de ella en redes y había una campaña de odio por parte de esta actriz, cosa que no se puede hacer porque si estás compitiendo pues, en cualquier categoría, creo, pero en especial en la misma categoría, no puedes pues, echarle tierra a tus competidores porque pues, no se hace y va en contra de las reglas de los Óscares. Entonces, lo que pasó fue que Brasil pues, se enojó y dijo, no, pues, o sea, luego, Carla Sofía trató de salir a decir que no, ella no había dicho eso, pero Brasil pues ya estaba enojado. Entonces todos los brasileños y todo el mundo empezó a buscar como de dónde sacarle más, para que ya se fuera esta hombre, mujer, y etcétera. Y salieron muchos tweets contra no solo la academia, pero personas de color, personas de la religión de la media luna, personas chinos, todo el mundo. O sea, señora odia a todo el mundo y algunos se podría decir que, va en contra de todo lo progre, woke, etcétera, pero pues digamos que se podría ser muy buena amiga de Caitlyn Jenner, amiga de Caitlyn Jenner. Y ahora, pues ya ahora sí todo el mundo estaba indignado, todo el mundo está diciendo quítenle la nominación, por amor a Dios, va en contra de todo lo que creemos, justo lo que estábamos hablando sobre Taylor Swift antes. Y por fin Netflix, que compró esta película para distribución, porque esta película empezó a salir primero por medios independientes y por sus propias casas productoras francesas, Netflix paga por mandar actores a todas estas nominaciones y para pues, que vayan a los shows y les pagan los maquillistas y que el avión y etcétera, para pues, que representen la película que ellos están poniendo como casa productora para los Óscares. Y ahora le dijeron a Carla Sofía Gascón que ya no, que muchas gracias, pero ya sí no te podemos poner enfrente de nadie porque vas a terminar causando un caos. Y yo creo que si esta película gana cualquier otro Oscar más que el que se salva, que es el de Zoe Saldaña, pero yo creo que ya ni ahí, o sea, todos los votantes, que la votación empezó hoy, para ya los premios en sí, todos los votantes yo creo que van a ver ese nombre y van a decir, ay, no, mejor vámonos por cualquier otra película. Yo creo que ya ni en las canciones se salva, empezando porque las canciones son pésimas. En uno de los videos que hice sobre la película puse ahí bastantes críticas en la descripción de otros youtubers que son músicos o que hacen musicales y hablando de pues cómo ni ahí se salva, no se salva nada. Maquillaje se ve, o sea, por ejemplo, todos los prostéticos que usaron en Carla Sofía Gascón cuando es el manitas, ahí se ve perfecto las líneas, entonces ni en eso se salvan. También pues cambia de color racial de cuando es hombre a cuando es mujer. Hay muchos problemas en esta película y ahora sí creo que fue como el final para Emilia Pérez, ahora que Netflix dijo ya no queremos saber de esta persona, nada más va a seguir hundiendo la película. Entonces, pues por lo menos de algo sirvió todo lo que muchos habíamos estado tratando de decir desde hace bastante tiempo. Entonces, ahí ya se me queda 1 minuto en español, ya se me está acabando, pero gracias si ya te vas porque no te interesa el lado en inglés. Muchas gracias por quedarte estos 15 minutos y buenas noches. Déjenme leo rápido porque vi unos chats. Te escuché hace poco y me parece de María Rivera, te escuché hace poco y me parece súper coherente, te escucharé a partir de ahora, eso necesitan las redes, personas inteligentes. Muchas gracias, a veces se me van las palabras en especial en vivo porque normalmente pues memorizo lo que voy a decir, pero muchas gracias por vernos y espero que sigamos mejorando. Y luego Kiryu Strife dice, dile a Taylor que coma tierra y que estuvo mal ir en contra de Trump en forma tan tonta como lo hizo, exactamente, en especial las personas y celebridades que piensan que sus fans todos van a estar de acuerdo con todo lo que hacen y dicen, pues ya vimos que no. Pero muchas gracias, buenas noches y ahorita ya nos regresamos con Guy. Denme 2 segundos en lo que rearticulo todo eso. Ok. And we're back. Sorry. I try to speak as fast as I can at the end because it's like, oh, it's 15 minutes. I have to shut up.
Oh, that's all good. We got a lot of stories today, so I think I got about 20 different stories. I don't know if we're going to make it through them all, but we'll try. A lot of geopolitics because Donald Trump is just flooding the zone with
and a lot of Trump too.
Going after different countries, doing new policies, things like this. I thought I'd start with a little bit of cultural issues first, just to lighten it up a little bit.
Sure.
So we'll start with Taylor Swift booed at the Super Bowl while Trump was given a standing ovation. So this is a huge cultural shift. Usually Taylor Swift would be cheered because she's also dating, I believe, is he the quarterback?
Travis Kelce.
Yeah,
it's the somebody from the...
Anyway, he was in the Super Bowl. He's been in the Super Bowl the last 3 years. So you would expect that she would get cheers. But instead, when they went to her on the big screen, the entire stadium booed her. And there's really a cultural shift happening right now in the United States and a lot of Western countries that movie stars and musicians just don't have the star power they used to. And regular people, content creators, and politicians, there seems to be a shift into that world. But what do you think?
Well, I was just talking about it in Spanish that yes, she made the terrible, and we got someone said it on in the chat that she made the terrible mistake of completely like going and throwing dirt against Trump and having all her fans do the same, but then realizing that some of her fans, I mean, especially the ones that she brought over from Tennessee and from all the country music, were gonna like him and were gonna vote for him, and that celebrities should probably not be involved in politics.
Well, I would say this too. I think it's more than a lot.
Either way, by the way.
I think it's more than a lot of her fans because she's been out for how many years do you think she's been popular for now? 20?
No, she was what, like 16?
So maybe 20?
And she's a few years older than me, so 30. She must be 35 or 36 now.
But how long has she been in the spotlight?
20 years?
20 years, yeah.
I mean, on and off at the beginning, but yeah, at least 20 years.
I think the point I wanted to make here was her fans started with her as children. A lot of those people are becoming mothers and going into careers. So a lot of these people are becoming much more conservative, and they do support Donald Trump and things like this. So I don't know.
And not even that, like they might support Maha, they might support other candidates.
Movement.
They might not care about politics and not like to see all the celebrities be, like their favorite celebrity, be so involved in politics and, you know.
And I was watching a liberal, was it a liberal podcast today? And they were analyzing, I think it was two-way. They were analyzing why Trump was given a standing ovation. And they said it was because it was $5,000 tickets at the Super Bowl. And these are all mega rich people. If you go to any other event, he wouldn't be getting cheered. But that's just not true because he shows up at a lot of UFC events. And UFC tickets might not be cheap, but they're not that expensive in the U.S., especially the nosebleeds. And people just love him when he enters the stadium. Mm-hmm. So,
and it's funny because I was reading this same article in Spanish. I think they did it in Spanish, and just the commentary is funny because this person said like she saw it happening live, and she says, to me the disparate reactions felt like a message that the Super Bowl, one of the biggest cultural events in the country, has been reclaimed by Trump and the type of toxic masculinity he appears to be the beacon of, and he and his supporters seem to be living off of it, be living for it. So I mean, this whole conversation about it's misogyny, Trump is bringing back all the misogyny and against women, and like they're trying to confirm all the things that they were saying were going to happen, but it's not happening. I mean, the Super Bowl has always been a beacon of masculinity. Or it was I'm waiting for the ambulance to go by. I hope everybody's okay. But yeah, like it's always been a beacon of masculinity, and they try to remove that. Like the main through line, I think, from almost all the stories we're doing today is that they tried for so long to make things appear like one way and be the way they wanted it to be, and now they're realizing that's not what the people want, and they're all scared.
Well, when we say appear, I would say they did more than just make it appear. They made it appear with billions of dollars, and we're going to get into it later. We'll stay on the cultural issues for now, but they funneled almost billions and billions of dollars is coming out. At the end of the day, it's probably going to end up being trillions. But the feminist narrative through line that they pumped into everything, people were rejecting en masse, I think, is what's happening. And now that you see this funding kind of disappearing on a global scale, what would naturally be popular is coming forward, and it's more of a shared demographic of masculinity and non-toxic femininity. Or feminism truly had become toxic over the last few years. So now the fact that maybe real femininity can emerge, it won't be shown to be as toxic. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Well, I think it's more a return to sanity and just people being normal humans without being completely consumed by ideology and being pushed this narrative and this one message everywhere in everything, in companies, in music and movies and everything. And just like not caring so much about these issues that a lot of them had been mostly solved, but then they had this resurgence with the like activists and the people that are so consumed by the ideology bringing it to the forefront, especially because a lot of NGOs had nothing better to do. They had already become these huge monsters, and now they were looking for other things to be activists for and other things to concentrate on. And then I think they just took it way too far. And people are saying, okay, we're tired, we don't care, we're sick of this. America was pretty good before all of this hatred and all of this division started, so let's go back.
Yeah, I think the big three things that were invested in was toxic feminism, the LGBTQ transgendered craziness that happened in transing kids, and then climate change and things like this. And I'll go to one of the final stories maybe first, just because it relates to this. But where was it? Many of the biggest countries missed the UN deadline set for the global climate targets, which was pretty interesting. It seems there's been a huge transition into nuclear now and back into fossil fuels. I think fossil fuels are going to bridge the gap until we get into nuclear. Green energy could have worked for very few countries that were in the right climate zone, but they kind of overpumped it to all these countries it wouldn't work for, such as Germany, the UK, Canada. These are cold weather countries this kind of stuff doesn't work for. But let's get back into the cultural topics. And the Super Bowl commercials this year were a lot less woke than normal. Mm-hmm. They were actually the opposite. They were trying to destroy woke, a lot of people say.
Yeah, I mean, there were still some that kind of kept being what they have been for a long time. But, I mean, there was even, I think, a pro-life
that's exactly what I was going to bring
commercial
up
on there, which normally, I mean, I don't think they would have even let it, go to air, much less be praised by most people.
No, yeah, I was really surprised because for today's stories, I was kind of reviewing, what were the Super Bowl commercials? And the main one that came up was a pro-life commercial, which was very interesting because this is going against the traditional narrative that happens in the United States, and for the Super Bowl to even allow a commercial like that on. Now, when I did watch it, I didn't find it so pro-life. I can understand how a lot of times they start grasping at straws just to say this wasn't woke. Look, they're talking about XYZ, but there wasn't. Even if the commercials were just en masse more normal, there wasn't all this DEI, woke craziness, LGBTQ being pushed in your face over and over again. So it was kind of nice just to have normal commercials this year, and it just kind of normalizes football again. I know football and a lot of other sports were starting to go woke. Hopefully they're going to go back to the middle. The NBA has lost 50% of its viewership, and it's because it's engaged in so much politics.
And I mean, it started because they went, as I spoke about in my Spanish video, the whole Kaepernick thing. It started with that, and then it just kind of took a nosedive. I was going to say nosedive.
It went head first into wokeness.
Yeah, they just went all for it, and it's been that way for a very long time. And these are things that normal guys that just turn on the TV to watch the game don't really, well, number one, connect with, but number two, it doesn't go with their main priorities or what their main reason for watching the sports is.
People generally want a break from life and a break from their problems, so they want politics left out of sports. It's the one time people get to really relax. And that's just not what sports have been doing over the past few years. I would say the one exception to the rule is the UFC. These guys are going to beat in each other's heads. So introducing politics when people have different political views and then they're going to fight it out actually brings a different element. And UFC was the one organization that really stuck by free speech, because it really does help promote fights. So when people are going to say crazy things, Dana White's always made it clear that this is a free speech sport and it's going to remain that way. So we'll go into the next cultural issue before we get into some pretty hardcore geopolitics, it looks like. But Disney dropped DEI in its SEC filing. Previously, it had promised 50% of all regular characters and guest appearances would come would involve 50% underrepresented groups. So if you look at the United States, it's 75% primarily Caucasian. So to introduce a 50% diversity quota, this is much above the normal demographic, what the normal different demographic population is. So it often looks very weird in different series when you have that much DEI in it.
Yeah, and it says here Disney has reduced its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, including removing references to the program for underrepresented voices. And that's the thing. Who gets to decide who these underrepresented voices are? Are they really underrepresented? Are they deciding themselves that they're underrepresented? And then, I mean, finally, I think it's good that Disney has started to realize for years their public has been telling them, hey, you're making all stories about things that either we don't care about or you're just hammering us over with ideology without really focusing on story, focusing on animation even, focusing on the way the things look, focusing on music, etc. So finally, I think now that they're seeing that everybody else is kind of moving away from it, at least in principle, or at least in the looks of it, now they've kind of started to decide to do the same. But
well, there's a lot of money being pumped into DEI and people that had DEI policies. So I think this is what sprung a lot of this stuff into Disney originally.
Yeah, and now they're scared of being discovered that they were taking either all this money or they were that's where it was being funneled.
If you're a company and you're going to walk away from DEI at any point and you don't want any backlash, now is the time, because every single company is doing it at once. So it's really hard to single out one company. So having companies abandon DEI right now, I think it's happening because everybody's doing it en masse. But when I was researching the story specifically, it wasn't just the on-screen characters and things like this. They were going to abandon the DEI. It was also going to be at the parks. So one thing people did complain about Disney, they used to have a dress code, no visible tattoos, you had to be clean cut, things like this. They've completely abandoned those policies. Yeah, you have a lot of people with different colored hair, tattoos. I mean, I have tattoos, but I do understand they can prevent you from getting certain jobs and things like this. So it's going to be interesting to see when the statistics actually come out on their Disney's new hires and things like this. Are they actually sticking to these policies? Because a lot of people in the power positions really believe in this ideology. So it's going to be interesting to see a lot of these companies, do they actually get rid of DEI and things like this?
Yeah, and on that topic, a lot of these companies, and it is something to kind of look out for and be on the, put on your detective hat sometimes, is that they're just changing the names of the programs. But for example, Disney was starting to institute a thing called Bridge, which I don't really remember what it stands for, but there is diversity, inclusion, and equity in the name Bridge, BRIDGE. So they might just be changing the names and saying, hey, we're not doing DEI anymore, but they're still implementing the same types of programs, the same type of hiring policies, the same type of, things they're putting into their media and their activism is still in there. It's just the people might not be looking for that because they're still focused on DEI.
Yeah, it's so deeply rooted into Disney. It's going to be interesting what happens because the government has its eye on Disney. For years now, Florida's been going to war with Disney. So if Disney doesn't actually make the changes, the government is going to notice and there may be repercussions. A lot of other companies might be able to get away with it, but if I were Disney, I would be walking a pretty straight line here, especially because Universal is opening just down the road from them.
Universe, yeah.
And I'm sure Universal is going to make all the changes internally to really go back with more traditional Americana and things like this.
I don't know if they will because they have had a lot of these same incidents as well. Universal has, and the parks as well. I'm very into Disney and Universal parks. On my time off, I watch news about it just because I want to go, but I don't because of how they think now. But for example, Disney had a pretty good relationship with the U.S. government, especially when they were trying to buy land in California.
They actually had the best relationship. Yeah. They were like a country within the U.S.
Yeah.
And they had their own police force. They were able to build their own nuclear plant if they wanted. The legislation they had, it was unlike any other corporation. So they were very tight with the government, and they had always left politics out of things. But over the last 10 years, that policy had changed, and they have really got themselves into some deep water. All those special privileges that they had in the special district of Florida that Disney World was on started to evaporate, and the government really started to single them out now.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy that went and came back again. What's the name of the Disney? See, my brain doesn't work today.
Okay,
whatever. I was going to say it kind of all mostly started with him. It's not Chapek. It's the other one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, fine.
Okay, the next story is going to be pretty hard into geopolitics. Trump's borders are Tom Holdman, Tom Holdman, I think his name is.
Tom Homan.
Holdman. Hence, okay, I'm trying to read the story here. Trump's borders are Tom Holden.
Holman. How hard is it to say?
Okay, why don't you tell about the story then?
Trump's borders are Tom Holman gives wild answer on if ICE will round up leftist groups aiding illegal migrants.
No, that wasn't the story.
Oh, sorry. So, what did Tom Holman do?
If you don't interrupt me this time, I can read it. Trump's borders are Tom Holden.
That is the story. Leftist groups, yes. Okay. That he's going to arrest them.
Oh, okay. Leftist groups and organizations aiding and abetting illegal immigrants in the United States. Okay. Sometimes
aiding illegal migrants.
Sometimes I just block you out and I don't hear you.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Okay. But that being said, a lot of leftist organizations have come out publicly on social media and other things, and within their own group meetings are saying they're not going to not follow any legislation or any laws that are going to deport people. So when ICE and police start coming around, they will not help and they will not assist. So I think Tom Holdman is wanting to make an example of these leftist organizations publicly, because if he does, it may get the other people in line.
Yeah, so he said illegal migrants could get, leftist groups who support illegal immigrants could get rounded up by federal authorities. While speaking outside of the White House on Tuesday, Holman was questioned if these groups and protesters waving foreign flags at anti-deportation rallies could face consequences for aiding illegal migrants, and he said yes.
Yeah, it's getting pretty crazy.
Probably yes, because you're now kind of aiding and abetting somebody committing a crime.
Yeah, the protests in Texas are getting pretty crazy. I've been watching a lot of footage and examples of it, and they're surrounding cars, almost flipping these things over, and just yelling "Viva la Mexico," waving Mexican flags.
Viva Mexico, not Viva la Mexico.
I mean, if they want to stay in the United States, this is probably the worst way they can do it.
And that's what I was going to say, that I speak about it on, I think, my tariffs video in Spanish, that they're causing all this mayhem, and here we say these protests have involved them blocking freeways, setting fires, and engaging in other mischief. Some of them have been peaceful, but a lot of the people that are doing, the screaming and yelling and setting things on fire, setting police cars on fire, are the children of Mexican American immigrants, and they themselves are just Americans, so they're not in fear of deportation. But they're kind of also making Mexico look bad and making anybody trying to, stay or who's over there look bad, and make people make these associations with what Latin American, at least migrants, are and what their purposes are. But yes, exactly. I've also seen a lot of people in comments of that video saying, if you want to be in Mexico so bad and you're shouting and yelling "Viva Mexico" and burning the American flag, then just go back. So the rhetoric is a little bit off kilter, because on the one hand they're saying we hate the U.S., but on the other one they're saying, but we need to stay and we have a right to stay, even though we got here in an illegal way.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, the ideological shift, I think, that might happen here in Mexico. If you don't know, we live here in Mexico, and right now people are all for open borders and helping migrants and things like this. So the U.S. had set up a lot of NGOs throughout Mexico, and other international organizations had embedded these NGOs into Mexico to help migrants go through South America or fly in from China, Russia, into Mexico, and basically walk up to the U.S. border and illegally immigrate into the country. But with all these migrants getting pushed back into their original home countries, Mexico is going to have a huge influx. And I think they're going to really start to understand, like, countries can't handle when they're having huge influxes. America is already letting in more legal migrants than any other country in the world, and they also allow more illegal migrants every year. And this is year after year after year for the past 20 years. So people don't really have much room to stand on to say the U.S. is not actually allowing migrants into the country. They are. They just need to get a control of the situation. And once they have control of the situation, I'm sure they're going to welcome even more migrants in, but they want to do it in a legal way.
And I mean, one of the things that I was going to say as you were talking right now is also a lot of people think of like the migrant situation and the illegal migrants in the U.S. as being all from Latin America or all from Mexico, and that's really not the case anymore. Like, there's so many Chinese people getting in there, people from Middle Eastern countries, Russians, etc. So the illegal immigration that's happening, it's not just from Latin American countries, and it is why a lot of, I think, people here in Mexico and elsewhere are angry or are concerned about it. But the thing is, it's the whole world that's now going and trying to migrate, and they fly into Mexico or the Mexican southern border and then walk up. But it's not just the people you think that are getting deported. It is also Russians and people from the Middle East and people from China that are not there legally. So I think the rhetoric has been placed too much on this image of the poor Mexican migrant with their backpack and looking for dreams. It's not that anymore.
One of the big issues is people are flooding from all around the world into Mexico, trying to immigrate into the United States. The issue with that is they're trying to seek asylum. And if you're seeking asylum, the first country that you make it to, you have to claim asylum in that country. So when they cross the U.S. border, they throw their old IDs on the ground. So the U.S. border is riddled with IDs from around the world, whether that's Russia, China, the Middle East, Africa. I know this because YouTubers go to the border and pick up these IDs off the ground, and they're showing people what's happening. These people have to throw their IDs on the ground because they don't want to, when they get picked up by the U.S. authorities, they can't look like they've passed through multiple countries, because if they had, they're not going to be eligible for asylum the same way if somebody coming directly from Mexico up to the U.S. is. Okay, the next story this is just a partial story, and I'm sure this will be coming out all week long, but it's one of the biggest scandals in modern, not even U.S. history, but world history. Billions of dollars is being funneled in a global cabal to journalists, to buy radio stations, to buy TV stations within countries within Europe, China, Russia, the entire world. Over 3,500 jobs have been lost in Jordan alone because of this USAID funding, and this was within media. The Cuban media is completely in limbo. In 2023, 9,000 journalists alone were trained by USAID money. I can go on and on the statistics, but I did get a lot of this from WikiLeaks. We'll go more into it later in the week because this is a growing story, and this is going to be one of the biggest scandals in U.S. history. Do you have anything to say about this, though?
Yeah, well, with the USAID scandal that's coming out now that they're actually going into the books and seeing where all this money that was supposed to be for development initiatives around the world was actually used for just influence initiatives of U.S. current leftist ideologies into all these other countries. And now that it's come out that we're funding and funneling money towards journalism operations, well, what does that mean for journalism everywhere? And what kind of stories were being concocted? And what kind of truth was being put out there? And what was actually being left out of stories? What were the biases and the tilts that they were now being kind of paid off to not put or to put into their stories? And this is now global. I mean, we saw it happening in Canada. We saw the government funding that happened to media and journalism in Canada. But now apparently also FEMA had something to do with, not FEMA, USAID had something to do with it, and now it's happening all around, apparently, the world.
When there's such a consensus in media, you know you're being lied to. People should be arguing. There should be differences of opinions between TV stations, between newspapers, but you're having these global narratives that seem to be all in line with each other. And if you look at the keywords, the hot words, and the titlings of these stories, they're just one journalist company's taking it and giving it to another, and it's just like from the top down, they all had the same narrative. And people have recognized this for a long time. When you go to a Thanksgiving dinner with your family, everybody has a different opinion, and that's kind of how the media is supposed to work, but that's not how it works anymore. Mm-hmm. And when this is the first thing Doge and Elon Musk had dug into was USAID, and they already uncovered this media cabal that was instituted on a global scale through hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, when they go into places like education and things like this, what they're going to find is it's a lot cheaper to buy academic papers and things like this within the academic community. So I'm expecting a larger capture within the academic community, that this would include college institutions, university, things like this.
Public schooling.
Public schooling,
all the public schooling unions and all the mayhem they've tried to cause for years now, and the things that they've been putting into these poor children's brains with all the ideology, the gender ideology, the overt actual racism that they're putting into stories, and the anti-racism that is actually just pure racism.
Well, I'm thinking the media had to be one of the more expensive industries to capture. It must have cost a lot of money, and other institutions like education, pharma, things like this are going to be a lot cheaper to lay capture over. So when they go into the Treasury Department and the Human Health Services Department and all these other departments, I'm expecting even larger scandals than what's currently coming out. And what's currently coming out is literally the largest scandal in modern history. The JFK assassination would surprise me a whole lot less because it's been talked about so much. This scandal has really come out of nowhere. Elon Musk simply followed the money, and this is what he found right off the bat. He dug 2 feet down, and this is what he's finding. So I'm interested to see what else is going to come out.
Yes.
But let's go into Trudeau now. Trudeau knows he's Trudeau says, knowing he's on his final countdown clock because he's already put in his resignation, or supposedly put in his resignation, his last days are getting near, and he can really be ruthless on what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do. So Trudeau was also caught on a hot mic saying Trump is serious about annexing Canada. So with those two statements combined, him saying he can do whatever he wants now that he's on the clock and there is no repercussions for what he does, and the fact that he actually believes Trump is trying to annex Canada, I'm kind of scared of what this guy's going to do. I've said and I've hypothesized a lot in the past that I think he wants to destroy the country to the point where they can implement a UBI. A UBI that's a universal basic income. If that's offered by the Liberal government just before the next election, or given out just before the next election, that is going to buy a whole lot of voters, and that's the only way I can see them clinging to power. Also, if a UBI is implemented, And even if they lose the election, that permanently embeds socialism within Canada. And they're well on their way to communism on that point. It's going to be very, very, very hard for a conservative government to take away a UBI once it's implemented. They would have to do that on the back of a digital currency, and they've already passed the legislation for the digital currency. So I think if Biden would have got into office, they had a plan. The fact that Trump's in there, they're having a headache on what to do now, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, a lot of people still think that he's leaving, but if something big happens or if he's needed, then he can also declare a state of emergency, set up the whole UBI thing, set up his party for whatever's coming, and I mean, they might still be able to win or at least maintain a bigger majority in the parliament, which is basically where all the decisions happen, if they can become allies again with, say, the NDP, the New Democratic Party, or another one of those parties that nobody really listens to. But I do think that people are putting too much hope also on the Conservatives that might be coming in, while I think they're going to be almost, if not the same.
I don't think they'll be the same,
almost,
but
almost.
If you're going to have to bet on somebody, at least you have somebody different to bet on, because
The PPC.
in UK you have nobody different to bet on.
Sure.
You're absolutely screwed right now. But people don't know, Trudeau did say he was going to resign. That was nothing solid, so he doesn't have to resign if he doesn't want to. They have Mark Carney. As soon as actually Parliament's kind of frozen right now. Parliament is the government in Canada. So it's frozen. That means they can't actually do anything. Mm-hmm. As soon as they unfreeze it, it's expected Trudeau is the opposition parties are going to call a snap election in Canada, and that will be the end of Trudeau. I think Trudeau is going to declare a state of emergency as one of his final acts before that election is called. What that would have happen is they would have a new Liberal candidate put in, and the election could be put off to mid-2026.
And I mean, we've seen him kind of do this before during the pandemic, when there were also, during those bad times back then, when there were also elections called, and he miraculously also won, because why? They were also handing out money to everybody during that time. So, I mean, right now with him, he was the one that froze Parliament. He was the one that is kind of trying to stay in power.
He destroyed Canada completely.
And he's going to continue on the destruction of Canada if he does call for an emergency and does somehow is able to institute the universal basic income, or at least start it on its tracks and then start a digital currency on its tracks. Then that's basically bye-bye for Canada, because there's already so many systems implemented that are not only socialistic. I mean, let's look at the healthcare, but also of tracking, and they've been starting to get more and more familiar with how to stay on top, let's say, of their citizens. We saw this when they started freezing the bank accounts of protesters during the Freedom Convoy and the truckers' protests. I mean, we've seen the overreach that this man and this government likes to do, and I mean, if they did it once, they might continue to do it, and if they have control of at least some of your income and also of your currency, then that's basically it.
Okay, and the next story is related to this. There's a 25% import tax or tariff tax on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States. So before we go into this, maybe I would say every politician in Canada right now is being a real loudmouth and talking crap and basically trying to run against Trump rather than fix their own country. Mexico's been a lot different. Claudia Sheinbaum has really kept quiet and successfully has kind of negotiated a lot better than Canada has anyway. But this tariff tax is coming in on aluminum and steel for the entire world that's importing it into the United States mainly affects Canada and the U.S. the most. Most other countries aren't affected. Oh, yeah, sorry, Canada and Mexico. Most other countries aren't affected. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to say about this?
Well, Trump says no exceptions with metal tariffs to start in March. And now leaders in Europe and Canada have said that they will not let Donald Trump's plans to hit their steel and aluminum exports with tariffs go unchallenged. The Europeans are also kind of freaking out, but
They don't deal with it as much. Primarily, the raw materials and also a lot of refined materials come from Canada and Mexico because there's large mining corporations within these countries. 70% of all mining corporations actually are headquartered within Canada, which is pretty amazing. Most of those are actually owned by Chinese foreign nationals and things like this, which is interesting. But I used to work in the mining industry. That's why I know a lot about it. I also used to work in oil and gas. But a lot of the minerals, once they're taken out in raw form, basically big giant rocks and things like this, are actually shipped down to the United States, usually along the border states with Canada for refinement. Once they're refined into big blocks of steel, they're very often shipped back to Canada, refined into a final product, and then shipped back to the United States. So from the raw ore going to the States, coming back, and then going back again, before you have a final product, it can cross the border 3 or 4 times, and that would be a tariff each time that material crosses through the border.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of countries like Europe, for example, they were kind of at first wanting to call us bluff, and now they're saying, okay, maybe he is serious, and now they want to get all brave and try to stand up to him and talk to him like, oh no, you're not going to do that. But I mean, in the end, we've seen that the best idea is to try to negotiate with the negotiator, essentially.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the mining industry works here in Mexico, but I'm guessing it works a lot better than in Canada, because in Canada what happens, because there's so many environmental laws, they don't actually refine their raw ore, which is a huge problem. If Canada could refine their raw ore and make turn the raw ore into steel, which they can then turn into a product, they would be much more self-sufficient. But Trudeau's handicapped that country through environmental legislation. I would guess that Mexico doesn't have the same environmental legislation. So once they extract the raw ore, they can turn it right into steel or aluminum, and then turn that into a product, or ship the steel and aluminum directly over to the United States, so it doesn't have to cross the border as many times. Mm-hmm. Okay, next, do you have anything else?
No.
Okay, we're only on story 8 here. We have 20 stories.
And we have 10 minutes.
Maybe we'll go a little bit over, but we'll just do a couple more stories before we finish for today.
The interesting ones.
Okay, this next story actually relates to the last story of the 25% tariff, and that is Trump is promising a reciprocal tariff on any countries that tax imports from the United States. So if Canada starts putting a retaliatory tariff on the United States, they might bring their tariff up or start tariffing other things. This would result in a tariff war. And you don't want to get into tariff war if you're Mexico or Canada, because each country only is a total 2.5% of the United States' GDP. So together, Canada and Mexico represent 5% of GDP of the United States, where the United States represents, I don't know, but I know it's upwards of 70 to 80% of GDP for Canada and Mexico. But going into the next story is the Office of the Attorney General, that would be Pam Bondi, will be seeking the death penalty on a federal level when it's in accordance with the law.
And remember, we have to mute the word.
Okay. The Biden administration had before turned away from this policy, and now they're kind of bringing it back. I don't personally like this policy, mainly for different reasons. Not because I don't think if guilty people did really, really heinous crimes, they shouldn't be put to death, but more because of government corruption. The government corruption in prosecutorial matters and judicial matters. I really just don't trust the government. And if you make a mistake and take somebody's life, there is no taking it back. This is the main reason I'm against the death penalty, because of corruption within the government itself. Do you have anything to say on this? Or you're scared to talk because you're scared to say words for
No,
YouTube?
I just don't want the stream to be taken down, or to get a community strike, because I'm still not 100% sure what actually triggers them. But Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, next story is Trump attempts to bring unions into the Republican Party or the GOP. Most unions are aligned with the Democratic Party. This goes way back to when a lot of these unions were formed. The issue you're having today is the union heads are completely opposite of the union members. Union heads are taking votes within their ranks, and the union members are voting against the union head and what the union wants. So union heads try to align themselves with Joe Biden and the Democratic Party in the last election, but the
Kamala.
No.
Before that, Joe.
Sorry, with
They
Joe.
got Joe to win.
No, with Joe, they aligned with Joe Biden, but then when Kamala Harris came in, they refused to align with her. And that was mainly because the majority of the members within these unions were Trump supporters. So it's interesting to see this split. And a lot of this has to, again, do with USAID money. The union heads were being bought off, and a lot of money were being basically pumped into these unions for union votes when election time had rolled around.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the unions were basically born out of a leftist tilt. But now that they're full of, working men, working people that usually have different values and different goals and different ideologies that are now aligning more with.
They have nationalistic ideologies, and they want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And the union members aren't afraid to say this. The union bosses are afraid to say this because they had all taken payoffs. Mm-hmm. Okay, why don't you tell the audience about what's going on with the U.S. penny?
I don't know.
Okay, the U.S. Mint has stopped minting pennies on the executive order of Donald Trump. Well, what do you think about that? You used to live in Canada, so they did away with the penny a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I got there a few years before they got rid of it. Never really affected me. Don't have much else to say about it.
Well, it costs more to actually manufacture a penny than a penny is actually worth. So it's a good general idea to get rid of the penny. Also, most pennies don't go into circulation. They actually go into people's coin bins and cups at home. So they're minting these pennies that cost more to actually mint than they're actually worth, and they don't stay in circulation. People just hold them and put them in penny jars at home and eventually roll them up and cash them in at the bank. But going into the next story, Doge is getting access to the FEMA data. The CFO of FEMA was fired. They are also going to go after the Treasury Department and the Department of Education coming up soon. But the amount of corruption that is in FEMA, everybody knows there's a lot of corruption, and the fact that Doge is getting access to this data now and they're not being stopped, I would expect another big scandal to come out here. I believe a judge is currently trying to save the Treasury Department. They came through this crazy order saying that if you were to investigate or audit the Treasury Department, that is illegal. But he didn't state in the order what law it broke. It was kind of an emergency order this liberal judge was trying to give to the Trump administration, so he's not able to audit the Treasury, which is absolutely insane. The people gave Donald Trump and the Republican Party a mandate to clear the swamp out, and how you're going to clear the swamp out is following the money. The money's going to lead to the data. The data is going to lead to the personnel, and you're going to be able to shut down and clean up these organizations.
I'm dying. Yes.
We also know FEMA, major FEMA scandals have come out over the past few months when it comes to especially North Carolina, I believe it was. They were caught on camera saying if people have Trump supporting signs in their yard, skip their house, don't give them the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the floods happened in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Your turn.
So, and so it's going to be interesting what does happen with FEMA, because also FEMA was busted recently. Let me find this story here. Oh, here it is. The Doge team discovered that FEMA had sent $59 million out last week to luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants. The money was meant for disaster relief in Los Angeles and within North Carolina, but was being spent on high-end hotels illegally in direct violation of Trump's executive order. So this is a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again they're just kind of doing those last what's it called when you're drowning and you're trying to get out? Like they're just trying to paddle to safety, but they can't. They're treading water. That's
well,
what
it's
I was
interesting.
trying to say. They're treading water, and now they don't know what to do with the like how to keep funneling or finish funneling what they were supposed to. So now they're just scrambling and trying to figure out, kind of like me today, trying to figure out how to finish their con, basically.
Well, and they can't build a narrative against this. Like, they're trying to say U.S. aid is funding and feeding people around the world, this and that. U.S. aid is international development. There's other aid organizations that actually do feed people around the world. USAID is a CIA front and does not... the aid in USAID does not stand for aid. It's for international development. And this was a CIA front. I can't say that enough, but the narrative they're trying to build is they were helping people around the world. What they were actually doing was implementing soft power to have political change where they wanted political change. But also the other narrative they're trying to build right now is Elon Musk is trying to steal money. That's why he's clearing out all these organizations. And that's just insane. This is one of the richest men in the world. The fact that he's clearing out the government, we owe him a huge gratitude.
Well, and I mean, it's the same thing that your favorite lawyer, Robert Barnes, always say. It's confession through projection. So what they do is they're basically confessing. We have tried to steal a lot of money by saying that Elon is trying to do it. So they're confessing to what they're doing by projecting it onto others, which also happens a lot to Trump when they're confessing through projecting onto Trump and saying, oh, he's doing this and that, and he's a criminal, he's corrupt, he's stealing money now, Elon Musk. But it probably is actually that they have been doing it, and that's
they have been doing it because it's coming out every single day. Another politician is worth $200 million on a salary of $170,000. How is that possible?
I also think it's going to take a while for the regular people and even the media to fully acknowledge what's going on, but eventually they'll have to, because the evidence will be too great. It's mounting, it keeps mounting, and I mean, once people realize what was actually happening with a lot of the U.S.'s money, they're not going to be very happy.
Well, I'm going to say this.
And the media might want to be on their side for this one.
No, I don't think so, because I think when the Twitter files came out, they were able to keep it under wraps quite a bit, and it wasn't as big of a scandal as it should have been, because the USAID money was funneling into a global media organizations that were holding the narrative and really not letting information out. Now that this USAID money is not funneling into these thousands of different media organizations, they're not going to be able to hold a narrative anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I really think these scandals are going to hit home on a whole nother level, not just to the American public, but to the world public. And I'm hoping the best example or the best thing Elon Musk and Donald Trump can do is set an example of how to clean up a corrupt government, because everybody knows the United States government has been corrupt for decades.
And we say this a lot, but this is one of the reasons why we kind of focus a lot on this in these past few days, because it is very interesting, and it is so also useful to kind of see an example of things that a lot of people have been asking for years, and a lot of governments and incoming presidents have promised to do for a very long time, but they never do. And to see it actually enacted and actually happening, and to wait and see what the results will be, is just fascinating. Well, so yes, it might be a lot of Trump, Elon, but it's because every day something new happens, because somebody's been brave enough to kind of lift the curtain and also show the world.
I'm really interested, because another country that is doing this is Argentina, and he's aligned himself very closely with Donald Trump. And Argentina is a much smaller country. So when Donald Trump does start handing out money again, I'm really thinking he's going to help Argentina and give a lot of funding to Argentina to help him continue to clean out his government, because Donald Trump and Elon Musk were both really looking into what the Argentinian government was doing and Javier Milei was doing in Argentina as kind of a template on where successes could be found and how they could do similar things in the United States. There were some interviews with Javier Milei and Elon Musk talking about this. But there's 4 more stories. We got a little bit of time, so we'll just go a little bit over today. So this next one, I'll be brief on it, but this is a huge scandal, and a lot of this was exposed through Doge again. But the U.S. government funneled $797 million into Guatemala, turning it into the child kidnapping the child kidnapping capital of the world. Over 190,000 Guatemalan children were trafficked into the United States with U.S. aid tax dollars. So this USAID just over and over and over again has their hands in some of the most despicable things like child trafficking. Now, to go more in depth into the story, if you do want to watch it, Redacted did a story. Yeah. Redacted's another YouTube channel, and I do highly recommend watching their story. They don't get canceled as easy as us because we are a small channel, so YouTube would like to censor us if we start talking a lot about child trafficking.
Yeah.
We'll go into the next one, and we'll get your thoughts on this one. The AI summit happened in Paris. The world leaders like Trudeau and J.D. Vance were there. Particular focus was given on the summit between the relationship between France and Mexico when it comes to AI.
Why is there a connection there?
I guess so. France has actually trained a lot of the technical ability of Mexico when it not only comes to AI, but when it comes to different technologies. When I was reading the article earlier, but J.D. Vance did give a speech at the conference, and he was saying that he hopes other Western countries follows the U.S. example when they go into AI. Now, particularly when we're talking about AI, I think a huge thing of this is the transition away from green energy. And I think this is what is really sparking the transition away from green energy is they need to move towards nuclear. They need massive amounts of energy, and green energy doesn't provide that. Even traditional forms of energy can't provide that at quantity. So the only way they're going to be able to do it is nuclear. That's why a lot of countries are talking about nuclear and moving towards nuclear.
And let me just acknowledge some of the people that have sent chats. Sorry. Taylor is the puppet of the elites. Mexico, a lot of people support Trump, even though those who clap for Ms. Sheinbaum call us traitors for not kneeling before the
Explain this better. What are you doing?
I'm reading chats. I'm translating them into English from Spanish.
I know, but I'm not understanding what you're saying because you're speaking in broken English now.
Because they're using a word that I can't say on YouTube.
Now I understand. Okay.
And then Admirante says, let's support with our like. Thank you very much. So this great channel can get to many more brothers and sisters that want to think for themselves, and so they're not told what to think. And thank you so much. And that is, one of our, if not the main one of our goals is to, keep encouraging critical thought and critical thinking and seeing stories from different perspectives and investigating more than just what headlines or other people tell you. Yeah,
we also in this channel, we're just kind of starting out and we're trying to build a big enough following. So we would like to go into other forms of content such as debate and things like this.
Documentaries.
I would also like to say about the super chats. We only received our first super chat a few days ago.
Yeah, our last stream.
And then maybe a week ago, we got our first super chat for our super thanks on a video. We really appreciate all of them.
Yes.
I never expected to get a super chat when we started doing this, so it always makes me smile, and I find it that people are actually listening to things we're saying.
Yeah, and also all the comments and just the positive response that we've received, especially from the videos in Spanish and the Mexican and Latin American or whatever you want to call it community. Thank you so much, because it was just a gamble when we did, when I did one video in Spanish and said, well, we're in Mexico now, but let's just try to make one in Spanish, and then the response was just huge. So, really, thank you so much.
Yeah, when we started the channel in Canada, when we were in Canada, we were getting censored. That was without a doubt. They have all kinds of legal censorship they're allowed to apply within Canada, so content creators trying to start channels that are especially political based are really getting censored in Canada is they have a tough time. So when we came down here, we weren't having a lot of success. And then, like she said, we tried that video in Spanish, and the Spanish audience has really allowed us to continue to do this.
Yes.
So thank you to everybody that's watching.
Sí. Muchas gracias.
Okay, so we only have one story left, actually, and that's the Trump administration successfully negotiates the release of the American teacher Mark Fogel from the Russian penal colony, or the Russian jail. So this is interesting because when the Biden administration was in there, he negotiated for the lesbian transgendered WNBA player when he had the option of choosing whoever he wanted, because there was quite a lot of people in Russian prison. So it was nice to actually see the Trump administration chose to negotiate the release of somebody that was actually forgotten, because he's not a spy, he wasn't an athlete, he wasn't a high profile man. He was just a middle-aged man that had a family back in the United States, and the Trump administration decided to negotiate for him. Now, this is really good to see because the Biden administration was not talking to Russia hardly at all. So the fact that the Trump administration is now negotiating to get people back, I'm hoping this leads to the end of the Ukraine war and they can start negotiating on other levels. Trump, in the press conference today, said he wants to end that war. That war does not need to be going on. It should never been started. And I happen to agree with him.
Yes.
Do you have anything to say about that?
No, it's been very Trump heavy, but as I mentioned, those are the stories that are coming out right now. And since this is basically Guy's opportunity to talk as well, and he knows so much more about geopolitics and the behind the scenes of all of it.
I really am trying to find stories that are more international, especially Mexico and South American based. But the stories that are Mexico and South America based, they're just very small, and they're not important right now on the sense that Trump is playing geopolitics on a level I've never seen any politician play it.
Yeah.
The changes that are being made are going to affect Mexico, South America, Africa. They're going to affect
Canada.
Every country in major different ways in 10 different aspects. So if the Ukraine war ends, that affects Mexico in huge ways. There was another story, I actually didn't put it on the list today, but Mexican drug cartels are buying massive amounts of weaponry from the Ukrainian government on the black market. So if the Ukrainian war ends, it affects other countries in huge ways, and not just the Ukrainian war, but almost every Trump story that we gave out today affects Mexico in some way, shape, or form. So even if you don't like Trump, I hope you've forgiven me for being so Trump-centric, and it's just because it has massive geopolitical implications.
And I mean, we'll continue to be, because I'm sure there's still going to continue to be a lot of stories coming out and a lot of things that we've never seen before or that are interesting to look into and talk about. So, yes. And I mean, I'll try to bring in a bit more culture battle stories as well. Today I was just kind of focused on finishing this video that I now have to go finish.
Also, the Mexican government's remaining really silent right now, and I think it is a smart strategy by Sheinbaum. I might not be a big fan of hers, but she's adapted to negotiating with Trump a lot better than Canada has. Canada had taken the opposite strategy.
Oh, for now.
For now, yeah. So we'll see what happens, but so far so good. I mean, I live here, so I'm hoping the best for Mexico.
Sure.
Okay, that's it for today. Sorry if it was a bit intense. It's a lot of geopolitics-based things these days, especially with Trump being in office, I guess.
And it'll continue to be that way. So maybe just mixing it up every now and then. Also, let us know what you're interested in, seeing during the lives or like conversation or in stories that interest you, etc. Because it's always interesting to see what the audience, and especially this audience, is interested in, because again, we had a more Canadian-based audience for a while, so it's always good to start the conversation. Yeah,
and late tonight or early tomorrow morning, we'll have another edited.
Late tonight.
Hopefully, late tonight we'll have another.
I'm finishing it now.
We'll have another edited video coming out about Latinx. Yes. So it's more of a cultural video. People seem to be drawn
in
to
Spanish, the same kind of videos I always do.
Okay, that's it for today.
Have a good night. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Adios.
This always takes me a while.